3 up, 2 across, tap that play button 3 times, and walk through the archway into Dialogue Alley. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Dialogue Alley is a show all about Harry Potter books, book translations, and all other things magical. I am Erik from Nocturne Erik on Instagram, and with me today is Carly from All the Pretty Books.
Hello.
Hello, and joining us today is a guest who is also a translation collector, also part of our Discord and Patreon supporter, and it is Brock.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Such a pleasure to actually meet you in this way.
Yeah, I mean we've talked before.
We've had such wonderful conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Such wonderful conversations. Good. We're happy to have you.
We are so glad you're here because Brock knows a lot about a lot of things, and one of those things is Harry Potter books, which is great because the three of us are Harry Potter book translation collectors, which means we collect Harry Potter books from all around the world in different languages, different adaptations, different variations, and some of them have great art. I mentioned that last week in the intro. I thought that was a really important point, that I think a lot of people just collect the art, which is why we talk about those box sets that we've been talking about, Carly, in the last few episodes there.
Such fun box sets.
They are. Well, and the art is a huge deal. Like, if people don't collect translations, just seeing the different interpretations of what Harry Potter looks like in different countries and different cultures is pretty fascinating and worth talking about, on its own, let alone translations.
I'd agree.
Yes, you would agree. So whenever we have a guest, Brock, we would always like the guests to tell us a little bit about themselves. So maybe who you are, how you got started collecting, what your favorite book is, what house you're in, just generic info, but particularly about kind of how you got into the translation community.
Yeah, so how I got into Harry Potter collecting was I actually started kind of collecting the books even before I officially collected them, because I like learning languages and I always purchased the series when I was learning a new language. So how I got into collecting was my wife, she's from the Basque country in Spain, and I was, as usual, learning a new language. I want to get the Harry Potter books in that language, but it was a lot more difficult to find these books than it was the other languages I had learned. I learned you can't just go to Amazon and purchase the Basque books. So I was searching around and I came across Peter's page on YouTube, and then found the Instagram and started talking to people, and eventually found these Basque books. So that's how I got into translation collecting. And that was about 2 years ago now.
So in 2 years you went from zero to all of them?
Well, I had 5 or so. I had Spanish and French and Portuguese and Catalan. So I went from 5 to 95.
Wow, that's very
well
impressive.
done. What house are you then? I have to ask now.
I am in Hufflepuff.
Really? That's
yes.
cool.
Which actually,
Hufflepuffs are good people.
If you look up the etymology of the name Brock, it means badger. So it's just perfect.
Well, there couldn't be any other answer then.
No.
No.
Oh, and that's too bad that Melanie is not here today, because she would have given you the virtual fist bump, per se.
Oh, I miss her. I miss her reaction to this information.
So, Brock, what is your favorite book in the series?
Yeah, so my favorite book, it's got a lot to do with nostalgia reasons, but it's book 5, Order of the Phoenix. It was actually the first book that I tried.
Oh, wow, good job.
The first one that I tried reading because I liked the cover in 4th grade. So I wanted to read the one with the coolest cover, and also because it was a big book and I wanted to be impressive. And I could never get through it because I had no idea what was going on. So eventually I went back to book 1. And yeah, so that's why I like book 5. And I also like the story and how things start to get a little darker and crazy in that book.
So does that mean you agree with me that book 5 has the best cover art of the 7 Grand Prix books?
Yes, I actually agreed with like four out of your seven.
Wow.
We had the same placement as well with the worst of the covers with Deathly Hallows. I'm not a huge fan of that cover either.
No, that's my least favorite.
All right. And we should mention, because you're here to talk about another language, what other languages do you speak or read in?
Yes, so I'm a Spanish teacher, so I speak Spanish. My wife, she's from Spain.
Well, that's good. So you better be able to speak Spanish if you're a Spanish teacher.
It's important. So we speak Spanish together, English together, and Basque together. But I've also studied Catalan and Portuguese, and I'm pretty good at those. And anything else I've studied is not worth mentioning.
Okay.
Catalan is wonderful too. I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
They all are. I love all the languages though. So well done. Well done. And Basque country is so beautiful. Oh my word. That's off topic, but it's true.
It's not off topic because, believe it or not, Carly, Brock is here to talk about the Basque translation of Harry Potter.
Oh, right.
That is why he's on the show today.
Right. So much fun.
So we'll have some news here. We'll talk about a little bit more about Basque in general. And Brock actually had the privilege to interview the translator of the Basque translation of Harry Potter, which we'll talk about in the main segment. And then, I mean, it is a spoiler alert, but the translation of the show tonight, we are going to talk about the Basque translation of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
Because we have to.
It's a Basque-a-Palooza here on Dialogue Alley today.
I bet that's a word you never thought you would say.
I've never said Basque-a-Palooza until right now.
I have never heard it. Okay, let's get into the news, shall we?
All right. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so Erik got a book. Erik, do you want to tell us about the book?
Yeah, so I kind of knew about this, but I kind of didn't. But I mentioned to my wife that I don't have an English version of a Philosopher's Stone book with the Brown-Beard Wizard. And Carly knew this, and Melanie knew this as well. But my wife found a 26th or 27th printing on eBay from the UK, and it was like $15. So she's like, well, why not? Let's give it a chance. And I think as people know, I don't really care about condition as much. That's not what my collection is. I'm kind of more of like the preservation of books. So honestly, if books are in worse condition, I kind of like having them because I know they're not going to deteriorate even further once I own them. So she got this book for like $15 plus shipping, and it's all right actually. Like it's not in the best condition. It's missing a chunk of one of the pages, but as I mentioned to both of you, like I've read the book a bunch of times. I know what the page says. I don't really care if it's missing a chunk of the page. And the spine's faded a little bit, but it's got brown beard on the back, and I mean it's held up pretty well. Like it just looks like it's been read by 15, 20 people or the same person.
And it
15,
probably
20
has,
times, right? And it definitely probably has. There's no name written on the inside, but like. As of now, I think this is the earliest printing of a UK Philosopher's Stone I have, because it only mentions that Chamber of Secrets is out on the inside. So it's a 27th printing. I'll confirm that. I just pulled it out and looked at it. So, I mean, yeah, for $15 plus shipping, I think it was like $20, $25 total. Like it was worth the risk, right? To give it a try. And why not?
And you got something new for your collection.
Totally, and
so it works.
Yeah, it could have been a Ted Smart book, right? Like who knows?
Well, not a soft cover, just a hard cover.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, they only did hardcover, but I didn't know if it was hard or soft until it arrived.
That doesn't mean if it was right. So I mean, it still would have been worth risk, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Like anytime the listing is that low in price, you never know. Like, is it actually going to be this book, or are they just listing it as this and it's going to be something else? Like I know Brock, you posted something that was for sale in the Discord for our Patreon members that was like, mislabeled book. It's actually Bulgarian.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Bulgarian books are terrible with their labeling. They always say they're Spanish, but it is Bulgarian.
It's not even the same alphabet. It's Cyrillic alphabet.
And this is actually very exciting. I would say exciting is kind of the right word for the translation collectors. We often wonder what value is of the big six, Asturian, Macedonian, Greenlandic, and so on, because we don't really know. Not enough sell on the open market, and not enough people know about different sales. Anyway, an Asturian book actually sold recently for, what was it, 3,000 euro?
Yeah, just under that. A little bit less.
Yeah.
Maybe around there.
Yeah. That's quite a bit. 3,000 euro in US dollars is what, like $3,600?
No, it's the same. The euro and the dollar are equal at the moment.
Are they the same?
Yep. For the first time ever.
I wasn't sure. It's been a while, actually, since they've been even near each other.
They've never been even.
That's kind of cool.
They've never, ever been 1-to-1 in the history of the euro.
No, not 1-to-1, but they've been close.
They've been close, but now they're 1-to-1 right now.
Because I remember a few times, well, actually when I was living in France, it wasn't too bad. Anyway, I digress. An Asturian sold for 3,000 euros, which is apparently also $3,000 at the moment. And that's really a lot for this book. I paid $450 for mine in 2000. When did I get mine? 2017, 18? I don't remember. Somewhere around in there, though. So the book has definitely, gone up in value quite a bit, but demand has also gone way, way up, I would say. Like, a lot more people are entering the translation collector, and there's only so many books to go around, right? Because this one's out of print. It's been out of print. There's only 700 copies for everybody. So if you're trying to get them all, there's going to be a premium to pay. What do y'all think?
That's even a book that non-translation collectors are after, just people that like the covers.
Right, because the art is so much fun, right? I love the art. That was a book, like, even before I started really getting into the translation thing, and I saw it, and I saw the spine, and I saw the back of the book. It was one that I really wanted to have.
I know that, like, Peter had a video series out on his Potter Collector channel about, like, the ultra rare books and stuff. Do you guys remember that? That was like a couple of years ago, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But he mentioned, and I texted him about this too, like, back in the day. Like, he mentioned that this book should be selling for more than it does. Even, like, 3,000's a lot, right? But, like, there's only 700 of them. It's one of the rarest Harry Potter books, period. Including first printing books of the hardcover and softcover in the UK. Like, there are not many of these books around in general. So the fact that some of these, first printing, first edition Philosopher's Stone books are selling for, hundreds of thousands of pounds in good condition, right? Like, it's rare, but, like, this book matches that rarity in just terms of volume of copies available. So, like,
and demand is like going up for it.
It is, and that's what I was going to say. Like, it seems like 3,000 is high. However, when you compare it to, like, another object that is desirable in the same fandom, obviously for different reasons, it has more mass appeal that it's in English, but just in terms of how many exist, it's actually still pretty cheap compared to those like firsts that are selling on auction. So, hopefully.
And I wouldn't be surprised to keep seeing this book go up in value.
Well, I'm hoping that because of this one that emerged, I'm hoping some more people that have this book, come forward with it and say, hey, I'll sell it. Because, there are people, I told you, like, I have family that are Spanish, and they had no idea this book existed. They had no idea that the Valencian book existed. So, the fact that people that live in, like, Asturias in Spain are like, nah, it's not real. Like, they don't even know.
And Brock has some book news.
Yeah, so one thing that happened just yesterday in acquisition was I got a school market edition. I purchased it. It hasn't arrived yet, but I don't have one yet. I wasn't planning on getting one, but there was one for cheap on eBay, and I just decided to watch it. They sent an offer, and I bought it. And
good job.
Yeah, so I'm excited for that one to come. And also on my Instagram page, which is Harry Potter _Liburuak, which is books in Basque, Liburuak. I'm doing a food series. So with each translation or each language, I'm making a dish from that country or one of the countries that that language is spoken, taking a picture of them together and posting them there.
I love it. I love food, though.
I
I've
love it
eaten
too.
my way
I think
around
it's
this planet. So good. I'm sorry. I love food. I'll talk about it all day long.
Insert transition to main segment now. How's that one?
That works. I like it.
Okay. All right. So for the main segment this episode, we're going to talk more about the Basque translation of Harry Potter. Basque is interesting in general. It's a language that transcends borders of a country, which there are a few Harry Potter translations that do this. Occitan is another one that I can think of off the top of my head. But it's more of like a people versus like a country's language, which is really cool that there's a demand for that, for language preservation and for readership in the communities that speak those languages. So Brock actually, well, you said you're married to someone that speaks Basque, which is amazing. That's incredible. So you took that one step further and you've really kind of pursued your interest in Basque and you actually reached out to the translator.
Yes. So I read through the books, and as I was reading, I took note of anything that I thought was an interesting translation, something that was really clever, some things that I thought were questionable or more interesting decisions. And I decided I'd reach out to the translator and ask him specifically about these specific examples and also just more about translation in general and his experience translating these books. And I was very happy that he was very excited to get my email. He's a very friendly person. And and it was a great time talking to him.
Well, I think that when you took notes about things that you noticed while you're reading, I think you emailed us and we did read that in one of the episodes. So
I did. At the very beginning of the podcast, you said at the end of an episode, if anyone has any other interesting facts about translations, let us know. So I sent a few of those. Some of them we'll talk a little bit more about in detail today.
Awesome. That sounds great. So, how much of this interview do you want to cover? Do you want to just take us through kind of some of your main highlights, or do you want to go through every question, or how do you want to do this?
So we can just start at the top and go down. There's one that I mentioned to skip. If we run out of time, we can skip other ones just as we see fit. I can read his answers and then we can comment them. Some might provoke more of a response from more of a discussion than others, but just see how it goes.
Sure. I think that sounds great.
Okay. So the first question I asked him was specific to the first book and specific to the first printing of the first book in Basque. So I asked him, on the last page of Philosopher's Stone, the following two books' titles are mentioned. So just like in English, sometimes at the end of the book, it mentions the next books in the series are. And with Chamber of Secrets' name, it's actually different than the name that they ended up using. So it says the secret room instead of the secret chamber. So I asked him what happened with this name change. Why did this happen? And something important, his foreword that he gave to before answering these questions was, remember, this was a long time ago for me. Since I've done a lot of translations and all that I translated for Harry Potter has been left behind as far as remembering the details. So this is just one job in a long career of translation. So he's not as passionate about this as we are. So the details kind of go away with time. But he said,
but I think that's a good point that you mentioned that, because I think often it's forgotten that the people that translate these books, this isn't the only translation they do, right? I'm assuming that, if they're this notable to be contacted to do a translation of Harry Potter in any language, that means they've probably done, 10s, 20s, 30s, maybe even hundreds of other books in whatever language they translate for. So it's just like he mentioned in the fore, like another job of translating. So this may or may not stick out in their mind as like something pivotal in their career.
Mm-hmm. And he talks a little bit more about that later. So just leave that for now. But he said,
Okay.
as far as why did the Chamber of Secrets name change, he says, I have no idea. I don't remember if it was a last minute change from my behalf or the publishing houses, but it's not surprising at all. I want to tell you that in the field of translation and in many other fields, this shows something that happens very often. In one moment, you put something temporary, in this case, room, but later, after reading the second book with a more complete perspective, it seems better to use a different term, chamber, and you don't feel yourself attached or controlled by what you initially put. Maybe something like that happened. I don't remember. He got these books. He went one by one. He didn't know what was going to be important later on. And in this case, one translation that initially seemed okay didn't make the cut later, and they changed it.
I feel like that's common when they like retranslate an entire series. Like I was thinking immediately of like the Russian books where they retranslated all of them because of the knowledge they had about what something is supposed to be in a future book.
Or even Vietnamese when they got to 5 and they were ordering like physically ordering a phoenix instead of like a group of people.
Right.
Kind of thing. Like I would think this would be a really hard, like I would, during my linguistic studies, one of the things I studied quite a bit was just translation and the art of it. Because there's a definite art. If people try to get too literal, it generally doesn't do too well because you lose so much in the translation, literally. Mm-hmm. But I think translating stuff, especially when you don't know what will be important later on, would be really, it's a shot in the dark. You have to go by intuition and just kind of gut feeling for things.
I think, and to me as someone that like teaches English to non-native speakers, like this shows that like language is still really complex. You could be an absolute, truly bilingual person and yet interpret something completely different than what someone else is intending in the language that they're presenting something in. So, which is amazing.
Idiomatic expressions. Like I was talking to a really good French friend of mine. We were talking in English at the time, and I said somebody died or something, and I said, "Well, they kicked the bucket," and he was like, why did they kick the bucket? Like he took it so literally. Right. Or like another time I was like, oh my goodness, good night as a form of like, WTF or whatever. And he was like, okay, good night. And he just hung up the phone. So, I mean, and he's a really good English speaker. It's just some things unless you're a part of the language all the time, you miss it.
And speaking of literal translations, that kind of moves into the second question, which is about the mirror of Erised. So this is one of the mistakes that I noticed in the book. And when I was writing him, I didn't say, you made this mistake. I tried to word it in a way that so I could see what his response would be. But I said in the first book, one chapter is called The Mirror of Erised. In English, Erised is desire backwards. Why didn't you give the mirror a Basque name? And he said, it was my error for mistaking and not putting Arised, which is desira, desire, backwards in Basque. I didn't realize it needed to be read backwards, and my wife didn't even realize, even though she is English, nor did the publishing house, although those who read my texts closely didn't know English very well. All in all, the responsibility is completely mine, not those other helpers. So in the Basque translation, he wrote Erised echo. Echo means of, so he literally just put of after the word, and mirror. So it's Erised of mirror, which doesn't quite work. So it was just a honest mistake on his behalf, and he didn't know how it was supposed to be, and there was nobody to tell him that.
Well, I think as an English speaker reading the book, nobody told me that Erised is desire backwards.
Yeah, I had no idea.
They didn't mention it in the book, right? Like you just have to kind of like, oh, like it's actually desire backwards. Or like when they did the whole thing, like I show you what, you desire or whatever. Like you have to just figure that on your own. Like Dumbledore doesn't come out and be like, by the way, it's desire backwards. Like, right. So like, even, I didn't notice that in my first reading or even maybe my second reading. So,
but how old were we when we were reading it?
Well, right. But like that could be something where like, I can totally picture myself like sitting at the cafeteria at school and someone like saying like, hey, do you know that like Mirror of Erisid's actually desire backwards? Kind of like, hey, if you do this in Mortal Kombat, you can do a whatever, fatality move on so-and-so. Like that, the internet wasn't as huge of a thing. So,
right.
It's just kind of on word of mouth and someone figuring something out and telling other people. So, I totally understand why he wouldn't notice this necessarily, or even the publisher.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, same. I would think that would be an easy oversight.
Mm-hmm.
Because as much as I would like to say I would have known, I probably wouldn't have caught on. I don't think I caught on for quite a bit.
Me neither. One thing about what he mentioned here about his wife, something important to note is his wife is from London, and she moved to the Basque Country, and they live there together. But she helps him a lot as he's translating. If he needs any help with, let's say, our previous example with like play on words or idioms, he has a great tool to go to.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful to have a native speaker there to throw ideas off of, for sure.
And she's also a translator as well, so a translating couple.
Oh, that's cool.
For Basque or for?
In English, for English. I'm not sure if Basque to English, Spanish to English, or what, but she translates into English.
Very cool.
And the next question is one of those that I wrote in about in that episode a long, long time ago about Hagrid's dialect. So if I said, I
remember you talking about this.
Yeah.
This was one of our conversations, if I don't remember, if I think so.
Yeah, you guys talked about it. And I wrote to him, I said, if I'm not mistaken, Hagrid speaks the Biscayan dialect. Why did you choose this Basque dialect? So I should mention a little bit about Basque dialects first, and also the standard language. So the Basque country is, like Erik said, it's not really a country. It's kind of like a cultural nation across the borders of two countries. So there's 4 territories in Spain and 3 in France. So it is in 2 countries. And in those different territories of the Basque country, they have different dialects. There's 6 dialects that correspond more or less to those 7 different regions. And there's varying levels of mutual intelligibility between them. So somebody from the far east of France and someone from the far west of Spain, it's very difficult for them to communicate. And the differences between those dialects are larger than, I would say, between some languages like Galician and Portuguese, I'd say are more similar than certain Basque dialects are to each other, even though they're considered the same language. So in the 1960s, the Royal Academy of the Basque Language got together. Well, they formed, and they decided they needed to make a standard language so people could communicate easier and in formal contexts like radio and news and literature as well, so that people could communicate and read easier. So that's what they did. And Harry Potter, the whole series, is written in this standard language. But as we know, Hagrid doesn't speak like everybody else. So the translator decided to use Biscayan. And I was wondering, why'd you pick Biscayan out of these 6 different dialects? What made you pick this? And he said, to have some way to distinguish Hagrid's way of speaking and also provide a space for the normalized Biscayan dialect in the books so that Biscayan children also feel more identified. It's true that there were some protests that I made the ragged, uncultured, uncivilized Hagrid speak Biscayan. It was necessary to distinguish Hagrid's way of speaking, and for better or worse, I decided to do that using the Biscayan dialect. But I wanted to keep it dignified, normalized, regulated, refined Biscayan, the closest to standard Basque and other Basque dialects, and not colloquial, closed, unrefined Biscayan. So I think he actually lives in this area, so he's familiar with that dialect. And it's also true that this dialect is very similar to standard Basque. So somebody who just knows the standard language could read Hagrid's sections without any trouble.
That is so well thought through.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting that he mentioned Biscayan children. That's the largest, the most populated of the Basque region. So it's true, a lot of the children that are going to be reading this book will be from there. And it would be cool to see somebody in the book speaking like you speak.
Yeah, you're represented.
Absolutely. Very cool.
What a great answer. I already have all the Basque or Basque translations, but this would make me want to buy them all again. Actually.
Well, don't do that. You don't need to do that.
No, I actually have all of them, but I love this language even more so.
Your Deathly Hallows, I actually made a trade with you for that one.
I remember that. I forget what I traded, but I remember. And I think that was the last book that I needed.
that was the only book that I purchased in a different country. When I was in the Basque country, it was the only one I could find because the other ones are like out of print. So I just got that book. And yeah, I ended up getting another copy. My wife's grandfather, when he learned that I was learning the Basque language, he bought me all the books that he could find and sent them to me. So
that's
I had
nice.
2 copies. So I kept the one he gifted.
That's very cool.
Yeah, of course.
All right, let's go to the next question that you asked.
Yeah, so in the Discord, before I actually sent the questions to the translator, who I don't think I've said his name yet, Iñaki Mendiguruin, before I sent the questions to him, I asked on the Discord if anyone had any particular questions that they wanted answered. And 2 people did. One was from Sean McAllister, who he was curious about what does a translator do if there's not like a direct translation for a word. How do they deal with things like that? Maybe if a word doesn't exist in one language, but it doesn't in another. So I kind of combined that with a question that I had specifically related to peeves. So in the Basque translation, peeves is referred to as an inchishua, which is like a half cow, half human Basque mythological creature that doesn't really...
We talked about this.
Yes.
That was... Yep.
And it doesn't really resemble a poltergeist much, except it's kind of, I don't know, a crazy, mischievous creature. But as far as appearance, it's quite different. So I was curious, why did he pick that word? So I said, peeves the inchishua is a poltergeist in English. Why did you translate it that way? Is it because poltergeist doesn't have a direct translation in Basque? He said, I don't remember the reason clearly, and I don't recall if the decision was mine or that of the publishing house. Maybe because poltergeist seemed too unknown or foreign to us, and maybe it was to avoid writing so many footnote explanations. So in the Basque books, there are footnotes. Maybe in the first book, there's probably 10 or 15, not too many, but as much as they could, I'm sure they want to avoid that to keep the continuity of the story so people aren't having to read those footnotes constantly. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting translation choice to call him an Inchishua.
Yeah, we talked about that. You even sent me what one of those looked like in folklore.
It's funny you mentioned the footnotes.
Very different.
I opened to chapter 10, Halloween, and it's like the title of the chapter has a footnote, and it has a whole paragraph on the bottom explaining what Halloween is. That's pretty cool. I know it's explaining what Halloween is and some Halloween traditions down there. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Another one's on the first page. There's a footnote after Harry's mother's last name explaining why it is that her last name is the same as Harry's father, because in Spain, last names are not the same with both parents. So they put a footnote to explain that.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Very
that's
cool.
correct.
I think that's super helpful. So that's awesome. Love that.
Yeah. So the next question is about play on words, which are all over in the series. So I picked one specific one to ask him about, which is I think it's in The Order of Phoenix when they are in the Hogshead for the first time. And Neville, they're all talking about Harry's feats that he'd done throughout the years. And Neville says his first year he got the Sorcerer's Stone, mispronouncing the name of it. And then Hermione corrects him and says it's the Sorcerer's Stone. Yeah. And in Basque, the word is Sorginaria, but Neville says Surginaria, which means the carpenter's stone. So I asked the translator, was it hard to come up with these play on words? And he says, play on words have always been quite difficult to translate. Oftentimes they're not translations at all because they can't be translated, but rather you need to come up with a different play on words to give the same meaning in the target language as in the original. Sometimes it can be easy and sometimes it can be hard. So this example stuck out to me because I thought it was so clever and it made me laugh so hard when I read it. And I think it was it's not a translation, but he did a perfect job at taking that same joke and putting it in a Basque context.
Well, especially making the words similar enough where a speaker of that language would maybe perhaps actually say that in place of the other word.
Yeah.
Right.
He didn't just do two completely different words. It wasn't he didn't actually say carpenter's stone versus wizard's stone. Those are so different. You would never mistake those two. So that's really cool that he was able to come up with something similar enough.
I would be interested in how he did the riddle at the end of book 4, because that has stumped a lot of translators. Like I think it's Mainland China Mandarin. They just kind of footnoted the whole thing because they didn't know what to do with it.
Are you referring to the Sphinx?
And it's hard.
The Sphinx's riddle, yeah.
Yes, the Sphinx riddle.
Yeah, so
that has stumped a lot of, and some translators and some of the better translations, they just kind of nailed it, doing similarly to what he did.
Mm-hmm. So what he did actually in that spot was, and in different languages, changed the animal that it was referring to. I think in English it's referring to a spider, right?
Yep.
It's
okay.
Yes.
In Basque, he does the same thing, and in Basque, spiders arma. So the first half is kind of similar to the second half, arma, and he says something along the lines of, like, the first half is like repeating this, the second half is like repeating the first half. It's similar. So he just kind of describes the sounds of that word.
Okay. Very cool. I wish I could read Basque now so I could check it out.
Okay, so the next question is, when did you receive the books in English, and did you feel pressure to translate them quickly? So he kind of interpreted this different. I kind of meant, like, once the translation was released, how quickly did you get a hold of the books? But he interpreted it as, when did you first start translating the books? And he said, when? I don't remember exactly. I think it would have been in 1999. In the beginning, I only received the first book. Harry Potter phenomenon was spreading, and it was beginning to gain fame in other languages. And he said, pressure, yes and no. Yes from the market, but not from the publishing house. In other words, as each book of the series came out, some went and read them in English right away. Later, they had the opportunity to read them in Spanish, those in the southern Basque Country, and French, those in the northern Basque Country. And I knew it was beneficial to translate them into Basque as soon as possible. But I couldn't push all my other clients away. So he talks about how with Harry Potter, what was the most difficult thing for him was that being a Basque translator isn't the most, he doesn't get the most money from it. It's not like Spanish or Russian or French where there's so much being translated. It's a smaller language. So he also has to do commercial translations for different organizations, public organizations. So he was doing Harry Potter and these commercial translations at the same time. So he said, I couldn't push that to the side and only work on Harry Potter. I made that clear to the publishing house and gave them full freedom to hire another translator if they wanted the Basque translation as soon as possible. But they preferred to stay with me, even though it was a bit slower, and they gave me freedom to go at my own pace. So I thought this was really interesting because, again, it just shows the human side of translation, and that he didn't have the luxury of translating Harry Potter for 12 hours a day. He had other responsibilities.
Right.
I think it's admirable on the part of the publishing house that they gave him that freedom to go a little bit slower, because if there was anyone who would want it translated quicker, it would be them, because they're going to lose readers as people start buying the books in Spanish and French. But
true, yeah,
I think it's true. Yep. Really great for them that they recognize that people have limits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I guess I think it shows a lot about, like, the community of readers too, right? Like if there was a, really, really high demand and pressure from the readers, the publisher probably would have been a little bit more, I don't know, harder, I guess, on him.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's really cool. Like you said, it's a very, like, human side of business where I think everyone was kind of understanding, which is really cool. It's very humbling.
All I know is that I really kind of want to learn Basque now.
I've got books. I can send them to you.
I'm sure. Like, I'm fascinated with the language anyway, and I love the translator. Like, I would love to just chat with him. He seems really interesting.
He's a nice guy, yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to finish up with from your interview here? Any highlights?
One last question, which was from Marty. Marty was wondering, are they going to make more of these books? Will they print them again? And the translator says, I don't know what the situation is. If I hear anything, I'll tell you. So we don't know. Probably not.
Probably not. Which, the fact that Marty asked that question, I think, is, in fact, Carly, a good segue into the translation of the show statistics that we can talk about.
I concur.
Yeah. Brock, why don't you head up this section, because you're our Basque expert here today.
Yeah, so between France and Spain, there's about 750,000 speakers of Basque, which isn't a lot, but it's spoken, as I mentioned, in the Basque country, in France and Spain. Most people who speak it aren't native speakers. They'll learn it in the school system. They'll speak France or Spain as their main language, but there are native speakers as well. It's what's known as a language isolate, which means there's no other languages in its family. It's part of the Basconic language family, and in the family is nobody else. It's just Basque. And if you look at a map, it's surrounded by Romance languages. People think Basque is related to Spanish, but it's not related to anything, let alone Spanish. And it's the only pre-Indo-European language in Europe, if I'm not mistaken, which pretty much means
I think you're correct.
It's really old. It's been there a long time, before the Romans arrived to the peninsula, before all these other languages like Latin were there. Basque had already been there for thousands of years.
Yeah. It's a fascinating language. We have no idea really where it came from, if I remember properly.
We don't.
It just is there.
People try to make connections, like there's, for example, Georgian, Armenian, Japanese are some languages people try to connect it to. Some people think it's the Iberian language that was spoken. Some people jokingly say it's the language that was spoken in Atlantis. So there's all kinds of different theories.
I've heard that.
Ooh, I love that. Like what you just said with all those different languages you mentioned, like I'm on page 94 and I'm looking at about 5 different words. Like one word definitely looks like it could be Japanese. One word is definitely the same in Basque as it is in Spanish. And like one word has like 3 consonants in a row that I have no idea how you'd possibly say it. So like it just seems like such a combination of all those. So I can see why people would have those theories of all those different influences, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. And most of those theories are grammar based than vocabulary based, because the word order is a lot different than other languages in the area. So a language that's a few thousand miles away, they think, well, there has to be a relation, even though probably there's none.
There's probably not. If it was related to anything, it could be long extinct at this point. Mm-hmm. Because it is so old.
Yeah. And one other little fact that I just put in here was during the 20th century, Basque, speaking in Basque was discouraged and even against the law during the Spanish dictatorship with Franco. So it suffered a lot in the last 100 years.
Oh, boo. We don't like that.
But
that makes me sad.
In the 1960s, that's when things started picking up and the language was revitalized. And now it's doing pretty well.
That's when the academies and things started coming out, didn't
Correct,
it?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, because I remember when I was researching the language a few years ago, it's done a pretty good job of getting out of the endangered area. Mm-hmm. Like it's still not, there's still some problems, but there's a lot of Basque pride now.
Definitely.
So you mentioned you couldn't find these on Amazon. I did get mine on Amazon Spain a while ago, but I don't think you can get them anymore. So how rare is this book?
I'd say maybe a 3, upper 3.
I would say that's a pretty good, like a 3+. Not quite a 4, but definitely 3+.
Oh, but they're getting harder to find. I know people that have asked me where to get one.
Well, and book 1 definitely is. Well, and they're on eBay. The thing about it is the sellers who are selling it on eBay currently, I think at this point are asking too high of a value. Also, I've noticed some of the sellers on eBay selling the books are like, it's a first print, when translation collectors don't really care about first prints. Mm-hmm. We care about pre-movie and things like that. And if the text block changed, sign me up, I'll buy the copy. But we don't really care as much about first prints as we do. Like, I do collect rare and signed books, and I do care about print in that point. But with my translations, I really don't, unless there's an art change, pre-movie, or internal art. Like with the French first print, those are pretty fun. Second print French is also pretty fun because of the internal art. That's why. It's not because it's a first print that I inherently care about it. And so I think that that's causing the Basque books that are up on eBay right now to be overpriced, is because they're earlier first prints, and I think that's their sellers going about it the wrong way. That's my little soapbox if I had to get on
That's hard to determine the value then, actually. So, like, I don't know, Brock, what would you say would be a good value for this book to pay?
Oh, probably between like maybe 90, 125 in that range.
I would agree.
I think that's pretty fair, which that's only gone up since I bought mine. So if you need this book, it's probably only going to get harder to find. So get one.
Because they are out of print at this point.
Yeah, exactly. But let's smell it, shall we?
The way you said that was, I don't know why I find it so funny. How does it smell?
Mine smells like old book.
Yes.
Mine does too, but I like it, so I'm giving it an A.
I don't have mine to smell, but I remember I have a pre-movie and I have a regular one, and the regular one smelled a little bit better than pre-movie. Pre-movie smelled kind of musky. So I'll give it an A. We'll average it.
I gave mine an E.
Oh, all right.
I like it.
E's good too. E's even better than A. Size and proportions. What do we think here?
I love the size and proportions of this book. I like how tall and thin it is.
I was going to say it's very tall and thin, and I like that. So I'm going E for size and proportions for me. Which
same. It gets an E.
I also gave E.
All right, and then feels in your hands. It's hardcover with no jacket, but it's not like slippery, which I appreciate when it's the hardcover with no jacket. Sometimes they're a little bit slick, like a magazine.
It's a nice hardcover.
It is. It's a really nice hardcover.
It feels good in my hand, and it's a nice thick board. The corners don't brown super easily, and you can read it, and the cover doesn't just like stick straight up because it's bound really, really well, which I know is the next trait. But I liked it.
I agree. So for how it feels in my hand, I'm actually going to give it an O. I wrote down O, which I can't find anything wrong with how it feels in my hand.
No.
How about you
I would give it a good O. I'll give it a good O.
I gave it an E.
All right. Why E, not O? Just curious.
Oh.
E-I-E-I-O.
I don't know. I'm just not blown away as I hold the book.
That's fair. It's totally fair.
A nice book.
I could see that.
It's like you went from the bottom up method out from the top down method. Like I started an O and I was like, I can't find anything wrong with this. Awesome. So the quality, I think it's made really well. I have a movie font book, but the binding's really good. I like how it has that little crease by the spine. So the spine's not ever going to bend or crease when you open it. Mine's made really well.
It's made really, it's a well-made book. It's bound really, really well. And one of mine has been read a few times. I can tell just by how the pages act. And there's barely a spine lean present. So I think that that's very indicative of a quality book. And it's very similar to the Galician and the European Spanish, which I also like.
So what are you going to give it?
I'm going to give it actually an O.
Wow. All right. Brock, what about you?
So I have a different opinion. I've noticed with these books, like Carly said, the Galician, the European Spanish, they're all the same book. They're pretty much identical. And I have noted the corners bend really easily. And then on the larger books, the binding kind of separates sometimes. So I actually said A.
I will notice that like my book 5, I think, has seen many better days. And the tops of the spine and the bottom of the spine round in really well from the weight of sitting on a shelf. And you don't see that in book 1, though. Mm-hmm. So I still think for book 1, I'm going to give it an O because the quality of book 1 is good. I don't think it held up throughout the rest of the series, though.
Well, I'm going to split the difference and go E. I think it's good. My copy, I can't judge anyone else's, but I will agree with Brock that the corners do bend really easily, even on the spine. Like the spine corner that's supposed to be round, like one of mine kind of tucks under, and there's really nothing I can do about it. And all the other corners are, 2 of them are sharp, but 2 of them are kind of mushy at the bottom where it's been sitting on the shelf. So I'm going E for that.
That works.
And then the cover art. It's the Spanish cover art, right? Essentially.
Mm-hmm. It's not my favorite cover art, so it's unacceptable for me.
Same here.
I agree. I like that it's got the yellow border around it, which is kind of cool, but I mean some of the Spanish books do that as well. So it's not.
I don't like the yellow border at all.
Me neither.
Well, I'm not saying I like it or not.
That makes me feel better.
I'm just saying that like it's acceptable because they just kind of did what was already being done for other books. Like they didn't do anything else. They just did the same thing.
I don't care for the illustration either. It's just not my favorite.
About the borders, I don't mind that it's yellow. I just mind that it's the same exact book as the Spanish books. If you didn't look closely, you would think it's the same. Whereas Galician, they made the cover different, and it's their own distinct way of interpreting it.
I'm actually curious how many Spanish or how many Basque books have been sold as Spanish by people not knowing.
It's an easy mistake to make, I guess, if you don't know Spanish.
Well, they look very similar. If you bought it in Spain or like that part of Europe area, you may not, even from a secondhand bookstore, you may not know. Mm-hmm. Like I could see it being a very easy mistake, and I just go back to how many books have I bought that were mislisted.
Right.
So I'm sure it happens. That's actually one of the reasons I watch the Spanish listings in the US eBay and the UK eBay, is because I could see quite a few flying under the radar.
You might get a Bulgarian thrown in there too, so who knows?
Or Romanian, or Greek.
Who knows?
And I believe the cover art is by Dolores, forget her last name.
Avendaño.
Yeah, thank you. I just didn't care for her interpretation, going back to that. Anyway.
Which it's very subjective. You're allowed to not like it as much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that's Basque, everybody. We did it.
We did it.
Yeah. And I think that's it. So, Brock, thank you for being on here to talk about Basque, because I honestly don't know anyone else that could come on here and talk about this.
No, yeah. I was actually... We can cut this out, but I have to tell you, Brock, when I found out you were a Basque speaker, I told everybody that I knew whether they cared about it or not. Because I think it is so cool, because that is a language that gets so little representation. And as somebody who loves language, I'm so thrilled that you're in the community.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm glad it excites you as much as it does.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm leaving that genuine gratuity in there. So,
okay.
Although I'm gonna have to cut like 3 minutes of something.
That's fine.
So that is all the time we have today. If you want to get in touch with any of us, you can find us all on Instagram. Carly is on there at All the Pretty Books. I am on there at Nocturne Erik. Melanie, who is absent today but is ever present in the Harry Potter collecting universe, is on Instagram at the Harry Potter Collection. And Brock is on Instagram at Harry Potter _ and I'm going to spell it for you, Liburuak. And that word is book in Basque, which is amazing. Carly and Melanie both have wonderful websites. You can find them at alltheprettybooks.net and theharrypottercollection.com. And remember, you can support our wonderful podcast. We mentioned the Discord a lot tonight, actually. Brock is part of our Discord as well. If you like this show, if you want to help support our show a little more, you can join us on Patreon for a small donation every month. You get access to our Discord, and for a little bit more, yet still very small donation a month, you get access to our bonus episodes every month. We put 1 or 2 out every month. They're pretty fun. I just have another one up there where I talk about a book that nobody else has that I know. Brock, do you have that one that I just talked about?
I do have that one.
You do? Way to go.
Which one is it?
I talked about Cursed Child Spanish translation.
Oh, that's why I don't have that one.
I know.
Okay.
So I knew that you and Miller.
That's my only Cursed Child I have.
Wow. Okay.
I have a Norwegian Cursed Child.
Oh, there you go. So that's my only Cursed Child translation I have because it's the only one I can read, and I'm like, I don't know if I need. I don't know if I need more than I can actually read in this language. So, if you want more bonus episodes, if you want to be a part of our Discord and talk to other translation collectors about Harry Potter books and stuff in general, you can join us on Patreon, which is patreon.com/dialoguealley, and that will point you in the right direction. And also, if you like what you're listening to on whatever service you're listening to, except for Google for some reason, they don't let you leave reviews, but highly encourage you to leave a review about our show. It helps give us feedback, as well as it helps our show get noticed by other people that are searching for it. So I know we have a very niche audience that listens to podcasts about Harry Potter book translations, but believe it or not, we found a lot of people that we didn't know existed that have said wow, this is exactly what I've been looking for. And that makes me very happy that we started this podcast.
Same. We have fun.
So I know when I started collecting translations, if this had existed at the time, I would have been really excited. So I'm glad that
I would have joined our Patreon.
I would have too. I'm glad that there are at least 2 or 3 people. But Johnny, who is also a translation collector, we were talking about the Patreon, there's enough stuff in the resources tab of our Discord where you could easily save tons of money buying things from links that people put in there versus pay $3 a month to be in our Discord, right? You could easily make up that much money just by saving money buying translations using the resources that people have put in there. So
same. I agree.
Plus it's fun, right? Everyone loves fun.
Yeah, I enjoy our chats.
Me too. All right. Well, Brock, thanks again for being on here.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll have you on again to talk about something.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I think it's going to happen. So, Carly, thank you for being here. It's always nice to chat with you. And
Ditto.
For the rest of you, it is now time to walk back through the archway and into our daily lives, and we'll catch you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.